this video, I'm going to do a full deep dive comparison of all three modern Oberheim synthesizers, the OB-6, OB-X8, and brand new TEO-5. This has got to be one of the most requested videos of all time for my channel, so I can't wait to show you. All that I ask is that if you enjoy this content, like, subscribe, and comment below which Oberheim is your favorite. I paid for these synths with my own money and nobody is asking me to make this video, so if you do want to support the channel, then make sure to check out the link in my description where you can buy preset packs that I've made for the OB-6, OB-X8, and soon the TEO-5. Similarly, if you decide to buy a synth after watching this video, please use my Perfect Circuit affiliate links in the description. It costs nothing extra for you and it helps me keep this channel's lights on. Without further ado, let's get started. All right, so let's start off with a sound that I've gotten as close as possible on all three Oberheim instruments. Now, as you can see, they are able to get really similar, and I love starting with this type of patch because to me, this is one of the quintessential Oberheim patches along with the slow strings patch, which is another one we'll look at. But why this is such a good patch to test to see if it really has the Oberheim mojo, this new TEO-5, and how it compares to the other two is because this patch really makes use of what, in my opinion, is the reason you get an Oberheim, which is the SEM filter. All right, so our init patch is a saw wave. And right off the bat, you can tell that the OB-6 is louder than the other two. And this is where my theory comes in as to why, in my humble opinion, spoiler, the TEO sounds a lot more like the OB-X8 than it does like the OB-6. I believe that the OB-6 has a different type of summing mixer somewhere in there, an analog summing mixer that really kind of makes the oscillators slam into it harder, which gives it a sort of more driven and aggressive sound versus the more modern vintage of the TEO and pure vintage of the OB-X8. So we can get them a bit closer though by bringing down the OB-6. And we're left with three saw waves. Let's bring in another oscillator and start off with comparing how the two sound when we do that. So we've got two saw waves here. Now the oscillators are different on all three. On the TEO-5, we have the same SSI-based oscillators as the Take-5 on the OB-6. We've got pretty much the same style of oscillators as the Prophet 6, and on the OB-X8. We've got our classic Oberheim oscillators. So yeah, where the differences really start to come into play is when we start to mix and match the wave shapes and see what we can do with them. So in terms of our oscillator shapes, we can have all 6 shapes that are possible going on at the same time. On the OB-6, we cannot do that. We're only limited to these 2 different oscillators and 1 shape at a time. And on the OB-X8, we can do the same thing as the TEO. But note that it does really add a really different and unique character when you mix and match the saw and the square on the OB-X8s. So we're gonna just stick to pulse width for now. Pulse width modulation is an absolutely key part of any good Oberheim synthesizer, any good analog synthesizer. So 2 LFOs plus cross mod on the TEO. I'm gonna go ahead and click destination, pulse width, and right off the bat, what you just saw me do there, if you like that kind of workflow, you want the TEO. Because this is the only one of these 3 synths that has a mod matrix. A mod matrix essentially allows us to do up to, I believe, 16 slots and change whatever we want. So for example, if we wanted to go ahead and take the noise and put it to the filter, there, just like that, we now have Same thing if we wanted to change that instead, for example, to oscillator 2. Now we have cross modulation, much like you'd get on the OB-6, but within a menu, which is pretty cool. Let's turn that off for now. We actually don't need any sort of FM for this patch, but we can mess with it at the end. But yeah, we're gonna go ahead and just do a basic pulse width modulation here. Awesome. All right, so we have our PWM going on with the TEO. Let's do the same on the other two synths. So right off the bat, you'll notice the OB-6 is the only one of the three that we get a specific knob for each oscillator's pulse width, which is really nice. We can do that in the menu for both the other two, but it's nice being able to just have a hands-on knob to set them there. So then we're gonna go take our single LFO. That's important to note. The OB-6 only has one LFO, and we're gonna set it to pulse width modulation for both. Pretty different already, right? Like these two sound surprisingly different. So if you have an OB-6, don't go ahead and throw away your OB-6. It's really a unique synth in its own right. Now let's do the same on the OB-X8. Wow. Now right off the bat, that just sounds amazing to me. There's something about the PWM with these real Oberheim oscillators. Okay, let's get some pulse width modulation. Love it. Okay, cool. Maybe we'll make that a little bit less thin. Cool. Okay, so next up we have our filters, and here's where we're going to do the classic filter sweep. Hopefully I don't get demonetized. Let's bump it down an octave on all three, and we're going to go ahead and play a low F. I'm going to hold this, maybe make it a little slower. And we have our beautiful SEM style filter. You can turn a vintage knob. We've got a variable state. Absolutely beautiful. Why you get an Oberheim is because of the SEM filter. Listen to those harmonics. Let's do the same thing on the OB-6. The original. You'll notice it's a bit more aggressive. And this is with maxed out resonance. We can still do the notch, high pass. I can add keyboard tracking. That might get us closer. There we go. And add vintage mode. So there we go. That's a good tip I should have caught there. So just like a traditional Oberheim, the TEO-5 init patch comes with keyboard tracking enabled. So to get it close, we want to have keyboard tracking on so it picks out different harmonics. It's still pretty different though, eh? It's really interesting. So I talked to Sequential and they did say that the TEO-5 filter is based on a brand new circuit. So it is not the same filter from the OB-X8 and it is not the same filter from the OB-6. So we're not just making stuff up, they do sound different, albeit marginally. Okay, let's do the same thing on the OB-X8 and here you'll see one of the biggest differences that may make or break your enjoyment of this synth. So I'm gonna bend down here and I mean, come on, sound-wise, that filter is incredible. But you'll you'll notice, you can't really see here with the controls, I'll shoot a B-roll shot, but you cannot do any sort of variable state stuff that you can on the traditional sim. Instead, you get those filters as different options. If we go in here, we can do a low pass from a Curtis chip, a 4-pole low pass, a new 4-pole modified low pass, which sounds great, they added that recently. This is one of my favorite filters. It's like a bass compensated Curtis Oberheim low pass. And then we've got our notch, band pass, high pass. And back to our sem. But you can't do the thing that you can do on both of these synths with the that beautiful state variable sound. So that's the filters. In my opinion, the best sounding filter by far is the OB-X8 filter, and you also get the most of them, but it's also got the feature I like the most missing, which is a real shame. So all three of them, amazing filters. They all pass with flying colors. All right, for this next section, let's go ahead and check out the envelopes, and we're gonna make the patch, the strings patch, as close as we can. So let's start off with the TEO-5, of course, and we have our envelopes here. We're gonna go ahead, turn the resonance down, make a nice slow shape. Lots of release. Beautiful. Put some velocity on that filter so you can play quietly. It's already starting to sound like it, right? Maybe a little bit more envelope. Beautiful. Let's do the same thing here, but make a note, you're gonna hear the most voice stealing on here because there are only 5 voices, 6 on the OB-6, 8 on the OB-X8. That is actually a big deal, and that's probably the #1 reason why, if you are finding that a concern, I would say go for one of the other 2. Okay, let's go ahead and do the same thing here. Beautiful. Okay, let's do a nice filter shape to velocity. A little bit slower than that. You can really start to tell the envelope shapes are quite different because I have almost the same exact envelope shapes dialed in on both knobs, and the OB-6 has a totally different character to the attack of the sound. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing on the OB-X8. So here we go. And I'm actually gonna turn down the master volume because we've got to be really careful. If you remember at the beginning, it was very quiet, but now with the resonance cranked up, we're actually getting clipping. So just like a classic, unruly old vintage synthesizer, this is what you get from that, and you just got to be careful when you're recording. So, but I love how it sounds. So let's go ahead and change our envelope shapes. We're gonna make that nice, long pad sound, and I have to say, the feeling of the envelope knobs and just overall the knobs on the OB-X8 is just so nice compared to the other 2. Add some modulation. Absolutely beautiful. We haven't even really touched the vintage knob here yet. Let's bring it in. That's just how good this thing sounds on its own. Max vintage knob. add some velocity in there to the filter. Maybe a little bit less release, so it's not quite as crazy. All right, off camera, I made the envelope shape a bit closer on the OB-6, so let's compare what all three sound like doing this very classic, very basic Oberheim pad. First, the TEO-5. Very beautiful. Next, the OB-6. Unbelievable. I will always love the way the OB-6 sounds. I have to say so far I prefer it. OB-X8. Beautiful. Let's do the same exact chord and compare, but so far I have to say this one is great, but there's definitely a slight edge for me for the OB-6 and OB-X8, and they're so different, right? Like this is definitely more similar to the X8. Okay, single F major chord, F major 7. Maybe make it open a little bit more there, just so it's even. Make this one open a little less. That is pretty great too. I have to say, it's great. And then against the OG. In a mix, no one would be able to tell the difference. I have to say, just pure sound-wise, the OB-X8 still wins. It's just amazing sounding, but I'm really, really, really impressed with the TEO-5 in how it's able to replicate the OB-X8, but I'm also really surprised at how different it sounds from the OB-6. All right, so for the last part of this comparison, let's look at some of the unique things that these synths can each do that the others can't. So again, starting with the TEO-5, and the most unique things by far, we've already looked at one, the mod matrix. Let's go ahead and start to mess up this sound with some modulation. Again, I love noise mod, so I'm gonna go ahead and take a slot here, source, noise, destination, filter, and we'll go ahead. Add that beautiful little bit of distortion. Let's actually go ahead and change that to the state. We're gonna modulate the filter state. Beautiful. Let's open the filter up a bit more. The next thing we're gonna check out is the through 0 FM, which is so awesome. This is unlike anything I've ever seen in an Oberheim synth. And essentially what it does is it allows you to do FM, but instead of traditional linear FM where it's very, cacophonous and unmusical like we have on both of these, more for sound effects, we have this beautiful sounding melodic through 0 FM that stays in pitch. So if I play this C note, we get all these crazy overtones, but we keep the original pitch of C, and it can track the entire keyboard. This is just so unbelievably powerful to have this on an analog Oberheim synthesizer, because Xmod is one of my favorite tricks on the Prophet 6, OB-6, Prophet 5. It just adds so much texture. You can do it a little bit on the X8, which we'll get to, but through zero, Xmod, through zero FM is so much more useful. Let's go ahead and we'll make that open up with the pressure. So we'll do destination Xmod. Amazing. Let's use the mod matrix to go ahead and we're going to make it a stereo sound. So I don't know if you can see my screen too well, but it's one of the options in here to go ahead and do voice spread, to panning. I don't like this, to be honest. It's a criticism I'm going to talk about in my full review. I think that they should have just added one extra knob like the other two have. Nice and wide. We have an overdrive here. It's a digital overdrive, which is a bit of a shame. It sounds pretty good though. But it definitely has that sort of like digital clipping sound to it. I don't use it too much. Let's use a little bit of it. And then we're going to go ahead and check out the effects section. So we have a whole bunch of really interesting effects. A really weird thing is you can't see any of the parameters on the screen. I don't know why that is, but what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and check out the effect called Lo-Fi, which is a brand new one that none of the other synths have. Add some nice warble. And just like that, we've got basically another vibrato LFO, but it's a random shape. Really, really cool, vibey. And we still haven't even used our last LFO. So we have a polyphonic LFO for LFO2, which is brand new. Neither of the other Oberheims have this. This is really powerful. So let's go ahead and we're going to send that to the filter. We're going to change the amount. And then we're going to go ahead and do one more mod slot. We're going to make the note number go to the LFO2 frequency. So now, as we play higher up the keyboard, we get a faster LFO. And we'll add our final new feature, which is the dedicated reverb effect, which, yes, it is so much better than the reverb on the OB-6. It's just beautiful sounding. Again, not as good as a pedal. If you're spending this much money on either of the other two, you probably already have a pedal already. But for the fact this is a budget synth and it has an actual usable reverb, so cool. The final thing we'll do, we see this low split button. Because we have such a short keyboard and we love to play low notes in our left hand and high at the other, we actually have a low split feature which allows you to split your keyboard so the left hand can play these nice low notes. And the high notes are played by the right hand, either 1 or 2 octaves above. Pretty cool, right? All right, for the OB-6, what's unique about the OB-6? Well, lots of things. First and foremost, the way we want to look at the OB-6, like I've mentioned, is that it is half Sequential Prophet from Dave Smith and half Oberheim from Tom Oberheim. So with the OB-6, although we have this beautiful SEM filter, a lot of the other DNA is actually from the Prophet line of synths. So let's go ahead and we're going to turn this into a pluck to start. We'll bring in that notch sound, which I just absolutely love on the OB-6. And we will bring in, first and foremost, some of this amazing analog distortion. This is just huge. Yeah. I wish so much that both these other synths had this built-in analog distortion. It's so awesome. And even if we just use it a little bit, let's go for like 10. It just adds such an awesome saturated sound to the OB-6. Like, that already right there could just be a song idea. And again, to me, the saturated sound of the OB-6 with this summing mixer or whatever's going on, please someone in the comments tell me if there's actually an analog summing mixer, because I've read it a bunch of times and I really think it's the only possible explanation for why this synth sounds so much more hot and saturated than the other two. But yeah, the analog summing mixer and the built-in analog distortion just adds such a really interesting, like, electrifying sound to this one that the other two just can't really get. But anyway, so let's see what else is unique. Well, we have, because it's a Prophet, we have the X mod section from the Prophet 5, basically. What that is we can either get rid of oscillator 2 if we want to run it as a second LFO, or we can run it at audio rates and do a whole bunch of interesting X mod FM. To things like the filter, the shape, the VCO. Really a bunch of options. The filter. And we can also use this section to control things with the envelope. So it's very old school. But it is what it is. It's very, very cool, but I do wish that the OB-6 had a full-on second LFO like the TEO-5, or at least a second vibrato LFO like the OB-X8. Only having one LFO is pretty tough, right? Okay, let's go ahead and we're gonna stereo spread this, and look how easy that was just with one knob. And then we're going to go ahead and add one of our effects. Now, the effects section on the OB-6 is not the best, but there's a couple of good ones. One I really like is the chorus. I think it's the same chorus on the TEO-5. So big props to them there, because the chorus is lovely. There we go. Beautiful and unstable, right? If we put the flanger too at full wet, one of my subscribers showed me this tip, so shout out to them. If we put it at full wet and then just a little bit of depth, basically acts as another LFO. So we can get away with using our one LFO for pulse width, and then we kind of have a workaround here to do that vibrato sound that, you know, I like to do in a lot of patches. Like, just such a vibe, right? Amazing. And then finally, we don't have a reverb. Again, just PSA, if you're buying reverbs, I think there actually was a reverb on just for that last bit by default. The reverbs are terrible. That's how I didn't even notice. Like that's max decay. Nah, it's just not it. But I actually don't mind the, one second here. I don't mind the BBD delay. It's not bad. There we go. So I think that's a pretty good representation of what makes the OB-6 special. So let's go ahead and go to the OB-X8 to finish things off. All right, now coming to the OB-X8 last, what makes the OB-X8 special? Well, I think right off the bat, we've already looked at it, but the sound is just so amazing on this thing. And the ability to jump through different filters can drastically alter a patch. Like for example, we take that same patch, we go to the Curtis filter. Take that same patch, we go to the notch filter. Go to the modified filter. You're basically getting like three different vintage analog polysynth Oberheims in one, with the ability to change things like the filter shape. We can change the envelope shape, for example. Let's go ahead and just throw some stereo spread on this while we're at it, because it sounds so glorious. We'll change the LFO type to be more like the OB-X. We'll change the envelope type wherever it is. I never really changed the envelope types, to be honest, but after this test, it's so different that I kind of want to. An LFO and envelope from a different type of synthesizer. We have this secondary LFO vibrato box. Super useful. To make it only affect oscillator 2. And we do get some of those more modern, weird style of sounds like cross mod, but it is a little bit archaic, I have to say. So for the traditional cross mod, it's just pretty much for noise and sound effects. We enable it here. And that is absolutely not linear at all. We're basically modulating the saw wave as the main modulator to the other carrier oscillator, and it sounds super cacophonous. There's no options for that, just pitch. We can do the same thing with filter envelope if we want to give up our, modulation oscillator. That's pretty much only for sync sounds. All three of them can do sync. I should have mentioned that, but there's so many features, can't cover them all, right? So yeah, more importantly and more interestingly, they actually have a hidden triangle cross mod that you can set the amount. So if we click page 2 and then turn up this oscillator 2 frequency, much nicer, right? Really, really, really great sound. I use that in almost all my patches. It's really lovely. Similarly, we do actually get a bit more options with the LFO bus. I know it's kind of hard to see here with the camera angle, but I'm doing my best. We can actually use 2 different buses for the LFO. So for example, we've already got this pulse width one. We could add in volume for tremolo. And then we could add in, for example, if we just want a little bit of filter, really, really nice, right? Like the ability to have two separate amounts at least is way more than the OB-6 can do, less than the TEO-5 can do. Finally, something pretty unique about this synthesizer. Again, not quite as good modulation-wise as the TEO-5. In fact, it's a lot less good modulation-wise, but something that it can do that the OB-6 cannot is we actually have two hidden LFOs in here, because something we'll get to in a sec is that it's bitimbral. So we can actually go ahead and do some fun stuff like LFO keyboard tracking to emulate what we just did up there with the TEO, where we're able to make higher notes, have a faster LFO, and lower notes have a slower LFO. So what that does is it gives us not quite the full polyphonic LFO vibe of the TEO, but we can get some really interesting textures that way. Absolutely massive, right? However, the true most powerful feature of the OB-X8 that maybe justifies its price over the other two is actually binaural mode. So the whole time we've been playing all three of these synths, we've been playing them with a single timbre, which means one sound across the entire keyboard. However, the OB-X8 is actually bitimbral, which means we can do either splits where we have, one sound like this and one sound like that. Now, obviously, we lose half our voices. It's going to be 4 and 4. And I don't really find splits too useful. If I was a live keyboardist, sure I would. But what I think is super powerful is the new binaural mode, where basically it's going to take the exact same patch and hard pan one, hard pan the other, give you controls for both. And what that's going to do is something truly special. So we'll use it with the patch we've been designing. If you hear without it, this is our beautiful patch. Now, if I go ahead and find the patch, I've saved it here, we now have a binaural version of it. That stereo width is just unachievable any other way, because you're literally getting two analog synthesizers with their imperfections, one panned hard right, one panned hard left, and it's simply, in my opinion, one of the most beautiful sounds. And then now we can control everything. Just absolutely massive for pads. Let's do something really pretty here. Listen to that. It's like swirling around in your head. And this can get even crazier if we start to mess with the different filter types and go to a notch, for example. Wow. Okay, if you like that stereo sound, true stereo binaural filters sweeping from left to right, only this one can do it. And to me, that is, if you're not going to use the binaural modes, this is a very, very expensive synthesizer. But if you have any interest in that, trust me, it is just as beautiful as it sounds. And it actually has a practical application too, because before I used to double track every part I would record with my Oberheim synths, and this actually saves a lot of time, because now as long as my parts are no more than 4 notes at a time, I can actually just single track them in binaural mode, and I get a full stereo double tracked sound. And that, ladies and gentlemen, does it for the comparison. Now let's jump to some individual sound demos to finish things off. Well, that was certainly a long video, but if you're still with me, thank you so much for watching. So you probably want to hear my thoughts, which one I recommend as my top choice, and which one I think you should buy. Well, drum roll please. My favorite of the three is still, honestly, the OB-6. The OB-6 to me just sounds so unique with its overdriven, saturated sound, and it really doesn't sound like either of the other two. However, the OB-6 is definitely not for everyone. I think if you just want that classic Oberheim flavor, the TEO-5 is an incredible bargain you cannot beat. At $1,500 US, the TEO-5 is an absolute bargain when it comes to getting that authentic Oberheim sound. It might not have quite as nice of a filter as the OB-X8, but I honestly prefer the filter of the TEO-5 over the OB-6 in a lot of cases. One other really important caveat is the price. We've already talked about how the TEO-5 is an absolute bargain relative to the other two at $1,500 US, but something new is that the Oberheim OB-X8 is currently on a large US-wide sale, bringing its price down from $5,000 USD to $4,000 USD, whereas the OB-6 recently last year, I believe, got a price increase all the way up to $3,500 USD. So for the money, for $500 more, I think you would be so hard pressed to justify getting an OB-6 over the OB-X8. Because if you have $3,500 to spend on an OB-6, if you can stretch that extra $500 and get the OB-X8, that's a crazy deal. That's less than I paid for mine when I first got it direct from Sequential 2 years ago. So personal bias aside, with me favoring the OB-6, I don't know why that is. I think I just really like the saturated and overdriven sound. I think that you cannot go wrong with any of these three instruments. The TEO-5 is a resounding success. I highly recommend it if you want that Oberheim vintage sound. If you really love synthwave, it really excels at those kinds of patches. And I think the only real cons I can think for it are the digital overdrive isn't my favorite, and the fact that it has a digital VCA. I don't know if this is what's causing it, but I do find that it sounds a bit compressed compared to the other two. You're not really going to be able to tell in this video because I'm running everything through a gentle master compressor, and then also YouTube compresses it as well. But if you hear all three in person side by side like I just did, the TEO-5 sounds noticeably more compressed and limited than the other two. For the OB-6, price woes aside, it just sounds awesome. It's the right form factor for me. It has the best workflow of the three with the least amount of menu diving, and although the modulation options are more limited than the TEO-5, I really like the cross mod section from the Prophet, and just overall it takes like a lot of my favorite things about the Prophet 5, Prophet 6 and combines them with a lot of my favorite things about Oberheim synthesizers. Finally, the OB-X8, the king of synths. What's left to be said? This synth sounds just incredible. It sounds like $1 million bucks. If you want that vintage Oberheim sound and you want the highest quality, highest fidelity oscillators and filters and the most options for modeling, and I shouldn't say modeling, recreating vintage authentic Oberheim tones, nothing else will get you there like the OB-X8. The fact that the OB-X8 has the 4-pole filters as well as just a whole bunch of different features like the different envelope shapes from the previous Oberheims, the different LFO mods, the binaural bitimbrality, it's so epic. My only regret is that I wish that they made a 16 voice version because 4 voices in bitimbral mode is not enough. But that's where I'm gonna wrap things up for today. And again, if you haven't already, please go check out my custom synth packs if you own any one of these synths, and please consider using my Perfect Circuit affiliate link to buy an Oberheim synth or anything else if you do find you want to buy one from watching this video. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Miles Away, and I will see you in the next video.